Ladies and gentlemen, the program will be started in a few minutes, so please be prepared. Turn on your video and audio. Thank you.
Rasa.
Resmi niku Pak nggih.
Wah, aku ra duwe kok.
Enten niku mau teng niki ya, teri ya.
Pundi, sampun.
Ini pakai ini. Speaker ini.
Ladies and gentlemen, participants, welcome to the webinar. As we're still waiting for UNAM representatives join with us, we do hope our program will be started in a few minutes, so please be prepared. Turn on your video and turn off your audio. Please use the virtual background we already sent to you in chat box. Thank you for your patience.
Please, we can go ahead with the conference, with the webinar, because the Professor Matango will be represented by Dr. Bucas Amis.
Okay.
The Vice Chancellor is having a tight program.
Okay.
He has requested Dr. Maggie Bucas Amis to read his speech.
Okay.
So we can start. Thank you very much.
Okay, then. Halo Mbak Saka, bisa dimulai Mbak Saka. Nanti Dr. Boykes Amis yang mengganti Pak Matango. Saya harus mengeluarkan word.
Good day to everyone, ladies and gentlemen, all participants. We would like to extend our warm welcome to all the guests to the webinar Indonesia Africa Center of Universitas Gadjah Mada with Indo-Africa Center. And this program is organized by the Center for Economic Democracy Studies of Universitas Gadjah Mada in collaboration with University of Namibia. UGM and UNAM has cooperation in the field of academic exchange, has also a significant influence on efforts to improve bilateral relations between Indonesia and Africa, especially in the agricultural sector. So this day, the webinar will focus on small medium enterprise, contract farming integration, collaboration, and social protection practices for local development. I, Katamara, will accompany you as the master of ceremony, and we have a great honor of welcoming our special invited guest, representatives of University of Namibia, Dr. Boykes Amis. Thank you, and good day to you. Honorable representatives of Universitas Gadjah Mada, head of the Center for Agro-Technology Innovation of Universitas Gadjah Mada, Dr. Taryono. Honorable speakers, Dr. Diogo, Professor Catur, Dr. Elina, Mrs. Masruro, and honorable moderator, Mrs. Kisha. Ladies and gentlemen, all participants, let me inform you about rules and regulations of this webinar program. All participants, we kindly ask you to display your names on Zoom meeting. Please mute your microphones. You are not allowed to unmute your mic if it is not your turn to present or speak. If your internet connection is stable, please turn on your video and turn off your audio. Please use the event virtual background that we have already sent to you. Participants who have questions during presentation are allowed to use the raise hands feature and deliver your question directly, or submit your questions to chat box directly and let the moderator relay them. Ladies and gentlemen, let me inform you about today's agenda. We will have speeches, photo session, plenary session, and will be ended by closing remarks. Let us kick off the program by listening the Indonesia national anthem, Indonesia Raya. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, next program we kindly ask Head of the Center for Agrotechnology Innovation of Universitas Gadjah Mada, Dr. Taryono, to deliver his welcoming speech. Dr. Taryono, can you hear my voice? So please turn on your audio or your microphone. Yeah, time is yours.
Yes, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning for Namibian and good afternoon for Indonesians. My Excellency, the Ambassador and the representative of Indonesian Embassy at Windhoek, Namibia, the representative of University of Namibia, distinguished webinar keynote speaker, distinguished academicians from both UGM and UNAM who participating in this webinar. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the University of Gadjah Mada, it is a very great pleasure to welcome you all in this important seminar. This webinar is the second round held by Universitas Gadjah Mada to follow up the plan to establish the Indonesian Africa Center for Sustainable Development Goals, generally between Indonesia and African universities, especially between Universitas Gadjah Mada and University of Namibia. In this good event, actually, the rector and the vice rector of research and community services of Universitas Gadjah Mada will be with us. Unfortunately, due to their hectic activities, they apologize to all of us with the hope that this webinar will be successful and fruitful. The focus of today's webinar is small medium enterprise, contract farming, integrations, collaborations, and social protection practices for local development organized by the Center for Economics Democracy Studies. Therefore, before we start, I would like to express my appreciation to the center, which generously helped us to make this webinar really happen. Small medium enterprise are not only vitally important to the developing countries, but also are crucial with their large share in advanced economic as well. SMA contributes in supplying certain activities to help big enterprises in a way of producing goods and services efficiently. SMA also have created the competitive state of the market, which lead to better satisfactions of consumers' needs. Another important feature of SMA is focusing on innovative processes, both in technology and in management. Thus, they help in forming the GDP and play a role in maintaining the social political stability in the country. According to the World Bank, they represent about 90% of businesses and more than 50% employment worldwide, and formal SMA contributes up to 40% of the national income GDP in emerging economies. This number are significantly higher when informal SMA are included. In developing countries such as Indonesia and Namibia, only a limited number of SMA are well prepared for the new conditions and increased competition encountered in global market. On the contrary, global market increase the ability of well-established foreign manufacturers and retailers to penetrate remote and underdeveloped markets, and makes it increasingly difficult for SME in developing countries to survive or at least maintain their business position in the local and, if applicable, global market. In emerging opportunity to reap the potential benefit of the global trade is represented by the integrations of SME into global chains of productions at various stages of added value, to the establishment of linkage with larger firm and foreign facilities. I would like to express my gratitude to my colleagues at the University of Namibia, especially Professor Van de Mille, Professor Matango, Professor Gideon, Professor Nyambe, Professor Boykes Amis, and all participants from UNAM. And also to all keynote speakers, Dr. Monteiro from Newcastle University, Dr. Elina Amadila from the University of Namibia, Professor Dr. Catur Sugianto from UGM, Mrs. Masruroh Sulistiawati from the International Street Consultant. I would like to thank also to the representatives of the Indonesian Embassy at Windhoek, Namibia, whom I cannot mention one by one for the always support to these great occasions, and also all participants for the contributions. We do hope that we can always work together to strengthen the collaborations between Indonesia and Africa. Once again, I wish you all find this webinar interesting and fruitful. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you, Dr. Taryono, for your speech. Ladies and gentlemen, next program, a welcoming remarks from the representatives of University of Namibia. Dr. Boykes Amis, please.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity. On behalf of the Vice Chancellor of the University of Namibia, Professor Kenneth Matango, I would like to deliver these welcoming remarks, and as Prof. Mandamela already indicated, humbly apologize as something else came up, and I am also going to deliver the speech, and then I have to switch over to open the Center for Innovation Learning in Teaching ongoing conference of the second day as well. So my honor to deliver this remarks on behalf of our Vice Chancellor. Director of Ceremonies, allow me to greet our counterpart, the President and Vice Chancellor of the Universitas Gadjah Mada, members of the Diplomatic Corps, representatives of government ministries, attendees from the private sector, Dr. Nyambe, the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Commerce, Management and Law. I believe myself is mentioned in here as well, Dr. Maggie Beekes-Amos, as the Director for Center for Innovation and Learning and Teaching, the local counterpart, part of the team, and on behalf of the University of Namibia. All our academic colleagues present here, Professor Mandamela, Osmond Mandamela, other participants that we could not recognize in terms of their affiliation, ladies and gentlemen. A very good morning to all of you. Today marks one of the major steps in the implementation of the agreement between our institutions of higher learning, namely the University of Namibia and the Universitas Gadjah Mada, UGM in Indonesia. This seminar makes this milestone, which serves as a catalyst for our relationship. As you may have noticed, the theme for this seminar is surrounding small and medium enterprises. Director of Ceremonies, it is indeed undoubtedly true that small and medium enterprises are the engine of the economy. Although most of our efforts to advance the progress of small and medium enterprises were undermined by the prevailing global pandemic of COVID-19, we are still re-energized to achieve our intended goal, and this seminar is a testimony to the resolve. For us as the University of Namibia, the pandemic robbed us of our talented academics who could have been part of this special occasion that signals another level in our growing relationship. And I believe it was everywhere the same. As intellectuals, platforms of this nature do not only open avenues for us to interrogate challenges, but it also reminds us about the urgent need for finding solutions to global problems, including those in our countries that small and medium enterprises face. Our commitment as academics is to find innovative ways, approaches, as well as strategies on how small and medium enterprises may be able to develop resilience in times of global pandemic. Both our institutions have convergence in their strategic visions, premised on your UGM becoming an excellent and innovative world-class university, while UNAM envisions to become a sustainable international hub of higher education, training, research, and innovation. All these commitments require that we are strategic and focused to achieve our visions. Director of Ceremonies, today's engagement sets the foundation of the Indo-Africa Center that this effort seeks to usher. In the words of Cecil DeMille, I quote, "The person who makes a success of living is the one who sees his goals steadily and aims for it unshaveringly. That is dedication." Therefore, our commitment to this cause is not debatable, and we are determined to forge ahead, to plant a seed that will yield tangible results that will help us to navigate the current challenges. Even if we want to revert to how we operated before, times are no longer the same, and this change demands adaptive systems of commerce and new skills. Once again, Director of Ceremonies, we are proud as a university to state that with the little we have in terms of resource endowments, our joint efforts make us stronger to face the future with determination. Today's event should be seen as an enabler to thinking differently and one that encourages us to continue looking for better ways of managing small businesses. It is about employing technology and adaptive systems that inculcates the element of economies of scale to production processes. As you will hear from various presenters, a knowledge economy is what will address future problems. To achieve such, our work should set the skills needed for the future labor workforce as driven by the fourth and further industrial revolutions. For UNAM, we have set our bar high as we have commenced with the curriculum transformation exercise in our university, taking into consideration skills required for jobs for the future in the digital revolution. In this connection, I therefore wish to call upon our academics and researchers from these two sister institutions to engender the ideals of impactful research for the betterment of the economies of the two countries. I will fail in my duties, Director of Ceremonies, ladies and gentlemen, if I do not commend the support from our shareholder, the Government of the Republic of Namibia, for the continued support towards our cause. In conclusion, Director of Ceremonies, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to implore the private sector to come on board as well and financially support this endeavor in order for us to drive outcomes that will empower the youth through job creation and reskilling. With that, ladies and gentlemen, as well as Director of Ceremonies, I thank you. On behalf of Dr. Kenneth Matango, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Namibia. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maggie Bekas Amis, for your welcoming remarks as the University of Namibia representatives. Ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to invite all participants to turn on your video. We are going to take screenshots for documentation. So there are 168 participants. We'll divide it into 4 slides. So the first slide, please, all of you turn on your video and I will lead the count and the committee will take the screenshots. 3, 2, 1, capture. Next slide. 3, 2, 1, capture. Next slide. 3, 2, 1, capture. And the last slide. 3, 2, 1, capture. Thank you for the photo session. Now it's time for plenary session, which will be chaired by our moderator, Mrs. Kisha Kwarina. All speakers are kindly turn on your video during the plenary session. And before we start the plenary session, let me inform you a short brief biography of Mrs. Kisha Kwarina. Kisha received her master's degree in development economics at the University of Sussex, United Kingdom in 2012 and a PhD in economics from Lancaster University, United Kingdom in 2017. Her PhD thesis examines the scaring effects of unemployment and economics inactivity in the UK labour market. Before joining Universitas Gadjah Mada, Kisha worked as a lecturer and researcher at the Department of Economics, Universitas Indonesia. She also used to work as a junior researcher at Lembaga Demografi, Universitas Indonesia. Kisha joined the Faculty of Economics and Business of Universitas Gadjah Mada in February 2021. She is currently an active lecturer and researcher. Her fields of interest specifically are labor economics, education economics, social protection, and any other development and economic related issues. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hand over the session of presentation and discussion to Mrs. Kisha for 2 hours.
All right, thank you very much, Mrs. Kotamara. That was a very warm welcome and a fine introduction. Thank you very much. Right, so Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen in Indonesia. Good morning to those in Africa and Europe. Good evening, perhaps, and good day to everyone anywhere around the globe who's joining us today. The honorable representatives from Universitas Gadjah Mada, University of Namibia, honorable speakers, committees, and all participants. Once again, I would like to have a warm welcome to everyone to today's Indonesia-Africa Center webinar on the topic of small medium enterprise held by Pusat Studi Ekonomi Kerakyatan Universitas Gadjah Mada in cooperation with University of Namibia. As being introduced by the Masters of Ceremony, Mrs. Kotamara, my name is Kisha. I'm from Faculty of Economics and Business Universitas Gadjah Mada, and I'll be the moderator of today's plenary session. But before proceeding to our main event, I will just kindly remind everyone about several housekeeping rules for this plenary session so it can go smoothly as we want it. First, just to remind everyone, all the participants, to make sure once again that your microphone is unmute, because sometimes, misclick, then everyone can hear whatever background that you have in our office. And then I would kindly ask everyone to rename their Zoom profile with your name and, if possible, your institution as well, which will be important during the Q&A sessions for us to introduce you with your name and also your institution. Yeah, I think that's basically about the housekeeping rules. So in this plenary sessions, we will have all of our 4 presenters to present their materials. And then after all presenters have presented their materials, then we will continue with the Q&A sessions after all presentations. And during the Q&A sessions, I think the Master of Ceremonies have explained this as well. But again, just to remind everyone, so to all participants, when we have the Q&A sessions to ask questions, you can use the raise hand button in Zoom. And once I call your name, then you may unmute your microphone, but please put your microphone on muted before I call your name. Once I call your name, that you may unmute your microphone to ask your questions. And then, so that's why it is very important for us to address your name and institutions. So please make sure you have renamed your profile with your name and institutions. Alternatively, if you want me to read your questions, although I usually encourage participants to ask their questions directly, but yeah, you can also use the chat box to put your questions to the speakers, right? All right, then. So moving on to our main event. So today we have 5 remarkable speakers that you don't want to miss for sure, both from the academics and also practitioners who are going to share their knowledge, experience, and expertise with us today. But before I invite our first speaker, please allow me to read a brief of introduction of each of our speakers. So I would like to start to introduce and also have read a little bit of CVs and introductions for our first speaker. Our first speaker, we have Dr. Diogo Souza Monteiro. Apologize if I mispronounce your name, Dr. Diogo. So Dr. Monteiro received his master's degree and PhD in resource economics from the University of Massachusetts, USA. Dr. Monteiro is a food business economist with expertise on the economics of information, consumer behavior, and supply chain coordination in the food industry. He uses survey and experimental economic method to investigate consumer acceptance and willingness to pay for nutrition, origin, and sustainable attributes of food, and preferences of contracts between parties in food chains. Dr. Monteiro successfully led multiple disciplinary and international teams investigating sustainable diets and more recently about the urban farming. And Dr. Monteiro is currently a senior lecturer in agribusiness management at the Newcastle University, United Kingdom. So welcome, Dr. Monteiro. Thank you for joining us today. I believe he's here somewhere. So yeah. Hello, Dr. Monteiro. Are you here with us?
69 mensen.
Okay. All right, then. So yeah, I assume that Dr. Monteiro is here with us. Right. Okay. Can the committee please make sure that everyone's microphone is muted?
Maar ik had al allemaal gisteren gekregen. Als ze niet kunnen bereiken, dat is het enigste moment dat je bericht hebt.
I'm sorry, can I proceed with the introductions of speakers?
Een vraag stellen, dan weet ik het. Om te vragen, hoe is dat?
The committee, could you please... Okay, there you go. Right, I'm sorry about that. So proceeding to introduce our second speaker, so we can have like 5 straight presentations after my introductions of the speakers. Our second speaker, we have Professor Catur Sugianto. Professor Sugianto is a professor in economics at Universitas Gadjah Mada. He received his master's degree in economics from University of Alberta, Canada, and a PhD in agricultural economics from the University of Illinois, Urbana, USA. Professor Sugianto was also an agricultural attaché for the Embassy of Indonesia in Brussels, Belgium from 2013 to 2016. He is currently the director of the doctorate program in Economics, Faculty of Economics and Business, Universitas Gadjah Mada. So I believe you are here, Professor Catur. Professor Catur, thank you for joining us today, Professor, and you're going to be the second speaker.
Okay.
All right, then. Thank you. So for our third speaker, we have Dr. Elina Amadila. Dr. Elina is a lecturer and researcher at the University of Namibia in the Faculty of Enterprise Development and Management. Dr. Elina received her master's degree from the University of Namibia and a PhD in development finance from the Stellenbosch University. She is also a research fellow at the Stellenbosch Institute for Advanced Study in Stellenbosch, South Africa. Dr. Elina has an interest in development finance, education, and disability studies. Her latest publication focuses on access to land and agricultural incentives for the youth in Namibia. So welcome, Dr. Elina, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right then, and then for our fourth and fifth speakers, so I believe there will be a joint presentations from Ibu Masrurah Sulistiawati and Nadir Umar Ulat. So Ibu Masrurah is an alumni of Magister Management, Universitas Gadjah Mada. She is an export practitioner, export marketing, and business developer. Ibu Masrurah is the owner of Maiswera Basket. Basket is small medium enterprises, and Ibu Masrurah is also the CEO of CV Belindo International. Meanwhile, Nadir Ulat is a business practitioner who concerns about the small medium enterprises with over 25 years of experience, promoting the SME businesses between Indonesia and Belgium since 1997. He is the founder of Belindo Association, the CEO of Barabas BVBA, and the CEO of the Bulwula. So welcome, Ibu Masrurah and Nadir. Thank you for joining us today, Ibu and Nadir. All right, thank you. All right then, so that's my brief introductions about the speakers. Now moving on to the main event of your presentations. So each speaker we will allocate around 20 minutes for each of your presentation. I will let you know if the time is almost up. And yes, I'm a very strict moderator in here because we have 5 presenters. I need to make sure that you guys are we follow the timeline in here. All right then. So without further ado, I would like to invite our first speaker, Dr. Diego Montero, to deliver his presentation. And Dr. Diego Montero will present about the contract farming and rural development in Africa, benefits and pitfalls. So Dr. Diego, are you here with us? Committee? Is Dr. Diego in here?
I don't see his name though.
Okay. So shall we jump to you, Prof. Chatur? Is there any confirmations?
No, I haven't received any confirmation yet.
All right then. So shall we jump to Professor Chatur? If you don't mind, you're going to be the first speaker then.
Okay,
so
no
we're going to proceed. All right then. So Professor Chatur. Oh, sorry. Is he here?
Just a second. He's sending me an email.
Okay. Okay, why don't we start with you, Prof. Chatur,
okay,
and then we can put Diego after your presentation if he's going to present after that. So again, 20 minutes on the clock, Prof. Chatur, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kisha, for a very nice introduction. The title of my paper is Contract Farming in Practice in Yogyakarta. I'll take the case of cacao farming. Is it visible, my presentation?
Yes, but it's clear.
Okay, yes. Well, here I'm kind of, half of practitioner and half of academician. Well, taking this case because there are many very interesting things. The first one is that, well, cacao is a non-traditional cash crop in this area, in the western part of Yogyakarta. It was a government program, and well, I don't know the reason, but that it might be because of the promise of the price and also, the growing export of cacao at the time back 20 years ago. Okay. And with that situation, the government at the time when they introduced the program, they promised to absorb the produce. Okay, but later on it was not realized. So cacao in the western part of Jakarta becomes, like a free market where everybody can produce and also sell the product. Okay. There is another fact that there is no chocolate factory nearby Yogyakarta. There are in Jakarta, which is like 560 kilometers away, and also in Surabaya, which is 300 something kilometers away. So there is no way for the farmer to sell their produce directly to the factory. And we know that we are small farmer in the sense that, they only have like half, maybe maximum 1 hectares per person. And so with that situation, cocoa collectors or traders come into play. Okay, there are many of them, and when we check how and where they send the product, they just tell us that, well, we sell it to the factory and no other information about where are the factory and so on. Okay, so that's the situation. I know that currently there are many, small cacao producer, cacao processor near Yogyakarta, but the market is already, spread out. I mean, the player, the number of trader, the region was so spread out. Okay, so that's the current situation. And because of that, the life of the people is in part rely on the cash crop. Okay, so cacao is only one of the source of income to the people. They have paddy, rice paddy. They also have other local produce, and they also have small livestock of, goat, chicken, and so on. And that's a usual, livestock for the people in this area. So with this other products, the time that is spent on the cacao, of course, is reduced, is limited, and also the effort to process the product as well. So farmers just keep the plantation and then let them the fruit go and then sell it to the collectors. In fact, Ichon trading, where selling the produce while not ripe yet, is practice in this area. To the farmer, this is the very easy source of cash, of course, from the traders, from the collectors. There's no administration, there is no warranty, and then there's no such problem at the beginning. So it's very easy to get the money from this. Okay. But the thing is that we note that this is only the market for raw products. Okay, it doesn't matter whether the farmer fermented or non-fermented, they have the same price. So there's no grading, low quality mixed with different quality and so on. So, and with that quality and with that so many traders, farmers can get maximum to 20,000 per kilogram, so raw. Okay. So like 1.5 USD. And they can basically freely sell the product to any collectors, but because of the Ichon trading system, they actually tied to the specific collector. So there's a specific relationship between the farmers and also the collector, where the collector gives them credit for the the daily needs and so on. Okay. Now, after 20 years of the program, I found that the farmers are already old, right? I'm getting older, and farming is not the first choice for the youth in the villages, and cacao trees are not well maintained, basically. So these going back here. These are one of them. Okay, the middle. This is me, and it is our partner in this area. So, okay, so he is also concerned about the continuation of the trees as well. But you know, that's the situation. Okay, I found that there's one lady over here, food crafter, who tried to process the cacao. But he's good in the sense that they only accept a good quality of material. Mention he she then give a specific requirement. Okay, so she said that, okay, the farmer group, if you want to work with me, then we have to follow the rule. Okay, so they do the grading, they train the processing, so that now we have first grade and second grade of cacao. Of course, with that grading system, she give a premium price. So the first grade they got 40,000, so it's like twice, and then the second grade got 30,000. There is no formal contract at the moment, but you know, there is a very close relationship between the farmer group and Miss Dwi Martuti in this case, the lady that I mentioned. So I said there is only yes or no deal approach here. Take it or leave it approach. You say yes, you have to closely follow the processing guidance. You send all of the produce to this lady. She guarantee that all of the produce will be absorbed. So, well, actually, the farmer become no free farmer actually. But with that, with following the guidance and following the rule, they have better price, and also they have a guarantee of the market. Okay. What about side selling and contract default? Well, I know that there's no contract, but this kind of relationship. The lady, Dwi Martuti of here, form a woman farmer group. So they work together with the wife of the farmer, and taking care of other activities. Many of them are not related to cacao processing or chocolate processing. Some of them, producing fried-based snack like banana fried, cassava fried, and even there's also Cendol. It is an ice sweet dessert that contains droplets of green rice flour jelly, coconut milk, and palm sugar syrup, and so on. So, and also there's also a lady who serve cater for food and other simple party purpose. Okay, so I found that with this farmer group, actually the wife who observed the behavior of the husband in managing the cacao. So instead of having a formal contract, she has a informal contract in the sense that with this woman group, woman farmers group, they have specific observer to the behavior of the farmer. So with that, the farmer keep the contract. They keep managing the cacao trees based on the guidance that they agree on. Ibu Dwi has the chocolate-based cafe. So this is the kind of activities that they have in a group. So any big order to Wendy's, the chocolate-based cafe, they can have ask for these other women to support and supply the food, to supply the snack, and so on. So if there's one office or two has some meeting in the cafe, so everybody has their own business. I mean, they can support this activity. So they can have cacao, chocolate, and then they can have chendol, fried with snack, even also big lunch in that area. So with this kind of collaboration, both the cacao business and also the local economic business can continue to operate. So I found that this is the kind of, I call it integrated activities where, you know, the farmer group who organize activities not only based on cacao, but based on their preference, the activities of the you know, the farmer group preference in managing their business, but linked to the main activities that Ibu Tuti has, where she is processing chocolate, and also have a contract with the farmer. So still the mothers have their own business, they taking care of the business together, but they can also become the, you know, observer of the peer of the farmer, the cacao farmer as well. So with that, it turned out that the cacao, or the raw cacao that is supplied to Ibu Dwi is have very good high quality, so she can produce chocolate wondis with a nice taste and also high quality. So with this type of collaboration, with the type of informal contract, we can have, you know, the local economic activity running, and, you know, trust, and also high price, you know, warranty of the quality and a warranty of the market are there. Okay, I heard that she is starting writing the formal contract, but it's not yet signed. So that's the one of the practice that I introduced to the audience. I hope this is a good start for the discussion in terms of how to build up the integrated farming, to build up the local economic activity based on the contract, based on trust, and help the farmers to increase the quality and also guarantee a certain price, such that all of the people, all of the participants can profit or gain additional income from the local economic activity. I think that's all I have today. Thank you, and enjoy the chocolate. It's not the coffee, but the chocolate. Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Chatur. That's a very concise presentation, so thank you very much. And yeah, it's very appetizing when I hear your presentations. Yeah, I think we need to drink and eat chocolate after this. So a very insightful and appetizing presentations. So moving on, I think Diego is still not here with us. So if I can ask Dr. Elina from University of Namibia as our second speaker. Dr. Elina, are you ready with your presentation? Yeah. So,
yes.
All right. So Dr. Elina will present about the role of social protection functions in agricultural small medium enterprises as instruments to curb food insecurity in a pandemic. Examples from selected countries. Right. So while Dr. Elina is preparing for her presentations, I would like to remind all of our participants again about putting your questions on the chat box if you prefer to do so, or you can use the raise hand button at the end when we have the Q&A sessions. Right. Thank you. Dr. Elina, 20 minutes on the clock and the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, good morning to those in Namibia, good afternoon to those in Indonesia, and perhaps good evening to other people in other parts of the world.
All right, thank you for the introduction, and like to welcome everyone here present today. My topic for this, for today will be the role of social protection functions and how these functions could play a role in agricultural small medium enterprises as instruments to keep food security in a pandemic. So we'll look at few examples from a few countries. I would like to start off going through what I'll be talking about. We'll briefly look at the importance of agricultural SMEs, identify problems in agriculture in Namibia before and during the pandemic. Then we look at briefly what is the theory behind what could those problems that are currently experienced. We look at why it is social protection and why combine social protection and agriculture, and then look at practical examples of how this has worked in different countries in the world, and then conclude the presentation. So I'd like to start off with the words of the then President of France, Nicolas Sarkozy, who said, "Economies fare better when there are efficient social protection schemes, because they help improve worker productivity and promote balanced and sustainable growth. Building up a social protection flow in each country will take time. But certainly we cannot impose upon the poorest countries the standards and social systems of the wealthiest, but progress must be made." Why do we start off with this particular quote is because I find it relevant when we talk about social protection in agriculture to say, yes, we can look at examples from different countries, and of course, different examples cannot apply exactly the same in all countries, but of course we need to start somewhere. And I think this is a step towards starting somewhere, towards making that progress with this current presentation that we have. So look at what do we mean by agricultural SMEs. When talking about agricultural SMEs, you're saying an agricultural SME or an agri-business, or small business that's involved in agriculture can be thought of as any agricultural business that fits the general definition of an SME for any given country or region. But since this study particularly focuses on the Namibian context, in Namibia, the general definition, and not just the small, medium enterprises in farming, the general definition of a small, medium enterprise, we are saying, is those enterprises that you look at the number of employees that are less than 5, have a turnover of US dollars of about 20,000 annually, and the capital employed should be about 8,117 USD. But because we are focusing on agricultural SMEs, here we adapt the definition of agricultural Bank of Namibia that refers to enterprises that are small, medium, and involved in agricultural production, as opposed to small, medium scale enterprises. So small scale farmers are those who are farming on 3 to 6 hectares, and medium scale farmers are those who are farming on 12 hectares. Although literature has argued that they should be cautioned on defining SME strictly on the basis of land, because then we ignore other factors when it comes to access to markets, access to the capital that they have. And therefore, for this particular research that I did, we should look at, or for this particular presentation, we should think of an agribusiness SME as that has, of course, considering the size of land and other factors when it comes to the type of income that is made and the capital and the number of employees. Now, what is the issue when it comes to agricultural small medium enterprises or small scale farmers? It's ironic that those who produce food or small scale farmers are the ones who are also more prone to poverty and hunger. And you would expect the opposite to happen, right? For someone who produces food, you expect them not to starve. But unfortunately, the ones that produce food, the reality is that they are the ones who are more prone to hunger. And as the consumers who buy the food, we can say we are fairly better off than those. And why is this the case? The problem is that when you look at those who are farming, especially the small scale farmers, before the pandemic, and by the pandemic, we start talking particularly or specifically when you look at, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic that's in different countries present. Before the pandemic, there has been, as much as we have small-scale farmers in different parts of the country, low agricultural productivity has consistently been cited as one of the main agricultural sector challenges. Of course, this is not unique to Namibia. As other farmers, for example, in Uganda, Ethiopia, Nigeria, Malawi, and Tanzania are also subject to risks and shocks and face difficulties in accessing markets, which do not always function properly, and sometimes they simply do not exist, these particular markets. Now, with Namibia being an arid and semi-arid country, it becomes even more difficult given those challenges that I just mentioned that are also experienced in other countries, because drought has had severe effects on farming. And one of the effects is that, for example, farmers experience a very steep increase in production costs due to drought, as low rainfall results in lower river levels, for example, which increases the power, that is electricity, that is needed to pump water to irrigation sites. So it's a triple effect, or it has, if one doesn't have access to electricity or water, it affects other things as well. For example, the return that one is going to get there and the livelihood strategies thereafter. Why is it not? Now, during the pandemic, given those challenges that were already there before the pandemic, between July and September 2020, when COVID-19 hit, around 428,000 people, that is about 17% of the population, particularly in Namibia, faced high levels of acute food insecurity or worse, including 14,000 people in emergency. There were specific regions in the country, about 7 regions that were classified as regions in crisis, while the remaining 7 analyzed regions as stressed, in a stressed situation when it comes to food insecurity. And the main drivers of this acute food insecurity are prolonged dry spells that were already there, of course, before COVID-19, and subsequently loss of income due to economic activities that most of them we put on hold because of COVID-19. So there is still projections, or there was projections that between October 2020 and March 2021, around 441,000 people were to be in crisis when it comes to food insecurity. Now, during the pandemic, COVID-19 restricted economic activities, which subsequently resulted in loss of employment, sharp decline in market prices, and a lack of access to agricultural inputs. Now, one would say in a pandemic, if farmers experience this type of hunger, given those statistics, you might as well conclude that they'll prioritize consuming the seeds that they produce as food over planting seeds for tomorrow, which then raises the threat of food shortages later on. And that is a concern if it comes to the situation of consuming seeds rather than actual food that they're supposed to plant for tomorrow. In one of the interviews I had with one of the small-scale farmers recently in one of the irrigation sites in Namibia, one of the challenges that they have, for example, when I said, given the situation that the country already experiences, it's an arid and semi-arid dry country. One of the farmers provided or gave me this information, and this is a direct quote from one of the small-scale farmers who say, if you look there, and this time he was showing me one of his small-scale site or his farm where he's producing or farming. So he said, If you look there, I only have 2 rows of corns left. The rest are destroyed because there's a lack of water, but having water here is not up to me, but up to the government. But I'm expected to pay back every cent, everything, even though I have not produced enough. When you look at, or when you listen to such concerns of not having enough produce, but then one go get a loan from a bank, for example, they are expected to pay back at a certain time, regardless of when that produced, whether someone has produced something or not. Of course, there are efforts that are made in the country. There's the Agricultural Bank of Namibia that is set up to provide finance, and a whole lot of others. But there are some issues that are not considered as to, does that farmer actually has the income to start paying back this loan? Looking at areas like issues like land, water, markets, and all those issues surrounding farming. Now, what theory could explain most of these problems that small-scale farmers experience? The theory of market failure explains or provides an explanation to some of why some of these issues experienced in agricultural, particularly for small-scale farmers. And when we look at market failure, we're saying we're looking at it as an equilibrium allocation of resources that is not well allocated, or Pareto optimal, as economists will call it. So the Pareto optimality or efficiency paradigm states that for macroeconomic efficiency to be achieved, there should be no room to make one person better off without making another person worse off. So markets fail because of the dysfunctional nature of price systems, as well as the structural imperfections. For example, market power, the abuse of market power, externalities, imperfect information between the farmer and, for example, the financial institution, and public goods. For example, there tends to be an overconsumption and underproduction, okay, of goods without any intervention when you look at produce, for example. Now, how does social protection come in? Social protection is a set of intervention whose objective is to reduce social and economic risk and vulnerability, and to alleviate extreme poverty and deprivation. The argument is that social protection generally can, in all sectors, can shrink extreme poverty and enhance food security, while also building household resilience in terms of crisis and stimulating rural households to invest in agricultural protection. So therefore, projects that combine elements of social protection, including agriculture, tend to emphasize broad poverty and vulnerability reduction goals relative to those projects that do not include social protection. And for social protection to work and to really achieve that goal of reducing vulnerability and poverty, there need to be 4 functions that in place, or 4 things in place that should be looked at. There should be protective functions. It should be able to protect, in this case, for example, small-scale farmers, making sure that they have income, some benefits or state pensions that they would get from the work that they do. There should be prevention, things to prevent things from happening before, then a reactive function, waiting for things to happen, and then that's when you take action. There should be some kind of social insurance in place, but also there should be a promotive function, where farmers, for example, are given some kind of incentives or inputs to help them with the production. Even water here could be a promotive function, electricity and all those type of things, but also a transformative function, which could include, for example, the labor laws that protect these small-scale farmers, to encourage them in the business of farming. So when agricultural interventions are coupled with social protection functions, you would find that it provides liquidity and certainty for farmers, allowing them to invest in agriculture, reallocate labor to on-farm activities, invest in human capital development, increase participation in social networks, and better manage risks, thereby allowing farmers to engage in more profitable livelihood and agricultural activities. So the current gap in the literature is that most of the literature on government efforts to finance agriculture and social protection comes from those countries, particularly Latin America and Asia, and very few come, for example, from African countries. This could be attributed to the fact that many Asian institutions are frequently suggested as models for successful government interventions in credit markets. And why, the question is why some works in other countries, but not in others. So for example, the International Finance Corporation disseminated the best practices of microfinance that have successfully implemented agricultural lending operations coupled with social protection, which targets agricultural smallholders in Latin America and Caribbean. So which measures and programs then to adopt during COVID-19? We look at few examples, for example, in Brazil. How did they, in terms of incorporating the social protection functions that I just briefly went through one or two slides earlier. So with Brazil's interventions and lessons to pick from this, that market failures and chronic rural poverty in Brazil has prompted government intervention in domestic food markets to connect large predictable markets to smallholder production, thereby utilizing the protective function of social problem. It's therefore one way of intervention took the form of structured demand to take care of poor access to markets. So this methodology of protective function connects large predictable markets, such as provision of food to schools and hospitals, to create a market for smallholder farmers. The government also intervened through the creation of the Food Acquisition Program and the National School Feeding Program as a way to create the problem of access to markets in those countries, but also the provision of unsubsidized loans at market interest rates against a note that is issued by the farmers to avoid issues or to avoid having problems where farmers cannot get a loan because they don't have collateral or they don't have some kind of security to pay back that loan. So there are some of those challenges were dealt with through the promotive or the promotive function, or to promote farmers through looking at giving them unsubsidized loan, but them giving a guarantee or a note that they're having these funds by in the next 2 years. This is what I would put on the table is produce, and this is what will have a market that is definitely, of course, the government assists in creating that market for the farmers, and definitely that produce will be sold for an income to the producer. Brazil also promoted agriculture for small-scale farmers through the construction of reservoirs to deal with the issue of water problems and related water infrastructure, and as a result. So as a result, there were programs of social assistance, the construction of a network of 700,000 rainwater storage, an increase in average household income, and other social policies, example, rural retirement, the food acquisition program, and the purchase of school meals. Of course, they also transformed agriculture through inclusion of small-scale farmers, which allowed farmers to make a leap forward in productivity by adopting upgrades. How was the inclusion? You may think, how was the inclusion aspect taken into account? When you're talking about the transformative action, it's about doing something that is different from how things have been done previously. So for example, one way in which the Banco de Brazil, a bank in Brazil, promoted agricultural production in Brazil, and of course contributed, for example, to increased access to finance way through the provision of unsubsidized loans, like I mentioned. And with this method of financing, farmers are more likely to invest, improve their technology, or seek out new buyers to deliver their products. And of course, there was insurance that was provided, of course, to farmers against all types of risks as a way to promote the preventive function of social protection. For example, there's a crop insurance program that was started in 2004, and that has protected or prevented a lot of things from happening and losing income for farmers from, for example, protection from flood, hail, drought, pests, etc., that could destroy the produce. In Costa Rica, for example, the government responded as a result of COVID-19 by building oyster farms to generate jobs for over 24 families that have lost jobs as a result of COVID-19. So this was coupled with a promotive and transformative functions of social protection by providing technical support and training on how to instead of just saying, okay, we're going to build farms and we're going to have a job, but does someone have the training? Does someone have the technical support to actually do what they're supposed to do? So there was technical support and training as regards to how to cultivate oysters and basic management tools to the families that were going to work in those farms for an income due to jobs that were lost. If you look at, for example, Indonesia, government, there was the agriculture, the government has intervened through government finance purchases, for example, price support of rice to farmers. And therefore, subsequently, there was a guaranteed price for rice producers in Indonesia, which stimulates farmers' output and leads to a protected agricultural sector and securing of farmers' incomes. Of course, in order also to increase limited quantities of subsidized credit to farmers, the interventions in Indonesia, there was policy efforts in the farm credit introduced, which led to the improved provision of fertilizer subsidies. Of course, there was also a move from the credit subsidy. Instead of just focusing on, yeah, let's give credit, loans, money. Instead of looking at credit subsidy, there was a move from that to rather a market-determined credit allocation, which continued to focus on income expansion and poverty reduction. And when you look at that kind of support, which instead of just relying on subsidies, as long as the government intervention is directed towards improving the legal and the regulatory framework, adopting appropriate governance arrangements and having management principles for interventions allowed one to reflect a new and a more promising approach to rural finance. Of course, the formal market allocation approach makes the case also for cost-effective alternatives, such as increased investment in rural infrastructure or in human development, unlike the credit subsidy that aims at for example, the short-term approach, or that looks at rather the credit alone. So what is currently happening? For example, in Namibia, when you look at the situation that is currently happening, or from the literature of what has happened in Indonesia in the past, even prior to COVID-19, it has been found that lending expertise on how really to lend to agriculture. Yes, there is support, there is interventions in the country, but you find, do we have designed lending expertise that's particularly for farming? Given that that is literature is found that that is a challenge. For example, the training that is received through the Southern African Development Community at the Development Finance Institutions Forums does not necessarily focus on agricultural finance, but rather focus on financing development industries in general. This is, for example, from one of the interviews I did in the past with one of the agricultural banking institutions in the country. So lessons on how that could work. For example, in Indonesia invested heavily in irrigation, and actions were taken such as increasing the quality of intensification, increasing cropping intensity, expanding planting area to cater for an increase in population, and improving agricultural infrastructure and facilities. For example, including irrigation networks or water challenges and improving food diversification. As a result. So that allowed for a preventive function, or to protect farmers, just like the case in Costa Rica, Brazil, for example. For example, in Indonesia, there was introduction of Farmer Protection and Empowerment Act as one of the key elements in adapting the climate change and supporting the development of agricultural sector. And Indonesia has therefore provided a good example to show that rural finance can be profitable when it does not rely on subsidies, as long as the government intervention also allows the environment for legal and regulatory frameworks for an appropriate governance arrangement. So in conclusion, it's important to highlight that it's important for governments to create enabling environments by employing social protection functions for their farmers in order to boost local produce. Of course, that needs to take into account the functions of social protection, and that is important now more than ever, especially now during COVID-19, when food insecurity and the number of people who are worried about where to get their next meal as a result of loss of jobs and those things are currently happening. It's important that social protection be coupled with many projects. Of course, not just looking at, of course, the goal, is to reduce vulnerability and poverty, but also consider all the functions actually in place and not just one or two. So the risk of the spread of COVID-19 is high when a country has to rely on food from beyond its borders. In addition, different countries where food is produced are giving priority to their citizens first, especially the citizens that have lost their jobs due to COVID-19. And therefore, countries have to find ways on how they can deal with their own produce first, rather than relying on a country that's also dealing with their own citizens. So it's therefore about time that social protection functions are employed so that issues leading to market failure are minimized and social protection is maximized to secure food for local citizens. And I conclude this presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Elena, for a remarkable presentations, because Professor Chatur finished early. So I was giving you more time because it was very interesting, but we will continue on the Q&A session. So please stay with us. All right, then. I think we do have Dr. Diogo Monteiro joining us, if I believe so. Dr. Monteiro, are you here with us?
Yes. Hello.
Hello. Right. Yeah.
I'm
so
sorry for the slight delay. I got a bit confused with the hour.
Okay.
Shall I start sharing my presentation?
Yes, Dr. Monteiro. So I have introduced your CVs actually at the beginning because I thought you were here. So apologize with that. I didn't check whether you were here or not. So so I believe you're joining from the UK then. It was supposed to be your turn, but now I'm going to give you the turn. So the time is about 20 minutes, Doctor, if that's possible for your presentations, and I will let you know if the time is almost up. And ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Monteiro is going to present about contract farming and rural development in Africa, benefits and pitfalls. So 20 minutes on the clock, Doctor, and the floor is all yours. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Elena, may I ask you to stop sharing for your presentations? Thank you.
Just bear with me a second. Oops. No. What did I want? Seconds. Right. Does everybody sees it?
Yes, it's clear, Doctor. So, maybe put on the full screen. That will be better.
There you go. First, good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you are in the world. And again, thank you so much for first the invitation to participate in this very interesting workshop. And again, particularly thank you for Professor Suyanto for inviting me. And again, I apologize for arriving a bit late. To be honest, I got a bit confused with the timings. The title of my presentation is I'm going to talk about contracts, and I'm going to talk more in general about contracts and what contracts are in economics from an economics perspective, and what are some of the issues that my colleagues and I have been looking at. There's a lot of recent work on the role of contracts in rural development, and I think Elena already did a great presentation showing some of the issues that Africa is facing, and particularly smallholder farmers. I think this complements a bit and provides a bit more background on what Elena just shared with us. I'm afraid I haven't worked as extensively in Africa as I would like to. I had a PhD student that did some work, but actually most of our work was actually based on lab work here in the UK. So I'm not going to share a lot of my own work, but hopefully we'll give you a bit of background that will allow us to get a bit more insight into the problems that Elena was just talking about, namely in terms of market failure, and how contracts can potentially address some of those market failures, but also what are the problems that contracts also have. I think you've introduced me, so I'm not going to spend much time in here, but I'll just start with the basics. You know, what is contract farming? What are contracts? And then talk about two different types of contracts that traditionally have been used in agriculture. So tenancy versus marketing or contract farming contracts. Talk a bit about formal and informal contracts and the consequences of these types of contracts. And then, you know, talk a bit about why farmers contract, and then some of the issues. And some of the issues are theoretical issues. So moral hazard and adverse selection is certainly an issue that potentially hinders the effectiveness of contracts. And associated to these is something that I've been working with my students, which is side selling and contract default, which is a major origin and driver of some of the issues that we have in the developing world, and particularly in Africa, on developing supply chains that can increase incomes to smallholder farmers. There are some issues we need to be careful about the type of farmers that we address, and I think some of the issues that we face, and hearing a bit the experience from others, it seems to me that maybe smaller farmers are not prepared to participate and take advantage of some of these opportunities that are emerging on participating in suppliers pools and have the benefits of contracting. So that's how I'm going to be concluding is some lessons that academics have been learning from studying contract agriculture in Africa, some of the benefits and some of the pitfalls. So that's sort of a summary of what I'm going to talk about. But let's start with sort of the basics. I think it's when we talk about the topic, it's very important to start with clear definitions of what we're talking about, so that we are clear. So what is a contract? I'm going to talk about contracts from an economic perspective, not from a legal perspective. So every lawyer that is on the assistance, please forgive me. I mean, obviously, you know, lawyers might have different perspectives on this, and would be interesting to learn about that in the discussion. But for an economist, a contract is simply an agreement between two parties, two agents, who have a reciprocal commitment in terms of their behaviors. So if I'm a farmer and I enter a contract to supply to a buyer, then the buyer agrees that he will pay me a certain amount, and it might be that part of that amount is paid up front or not. And I'm, as a farmer, I'm committed to sell to that buyer and to that buyer alone my produce. So that's an example. Now the problem with this is that there's a lot of behaviors that are associated with this, and often it's not possible to contractualize all the possible behaviors that the two agents have, and this is one of the issues that contracts may have. So in economics, what contract theory actually examines is optimality. What are the optimal conditions in which a contract should be designed? So again, an example there again is typical contracts that we all have with our employers. I mean, an employer offers a wage and maybe some benefits to which we exchange with performance of a task or a job that we have to do. Now, interestingly, contracts have been used in agriculture for a long time, and there are many different types of contracts. And I'm not going to be bothering you with all the types of contracts that are in agriculture. I'm going to just summarize two sort of types of contracts. But the advantage is really that they reduce uncertainty on the transactions. So whereas in competitive markets, you go to the market and you will have to sell at the prevailing price whatever you have to offer, and there's an assumption that you won't necessarily ever meet the person that you sold that product to. In contracts, there's more of a connection between two people that then agree on that transaction. So that's sort of the fundamental difference. So in a way, contracts can be seen as an alternative to sales in markets, and particularly spot markets that have been used in all sorts of forms of human transactions and organization. So in agriculture, a very traditional form of contract was a tenancy agreement. And this type of contract is a contract between a landlord, somebody that owns the land, but doesn't necessarily want to farm that land, and a farmer, which has expertise on how to grow a crop or how to grow animals, but doesn't have land, doesn't have the resource. And so there's then an agreement between the landlord and the tenants. And the landlord obviously wants to have some return on the use of the land, and there's different ways that this return can be produced. And of course, the farmer will get some income from selling the production that he obtains from using the land from the landlord. Now, if you kind of start thinking a bit deeply about this problem, obviously, there's different ways to address it. In the limits, the landlord can just employ the farmer and just hire him as an employee, and so he becomes, an employee, and so it has some control over him. Or they can remain independent, and then with that, the landlord can agree a fixed rent. They can agree to share the crop, the value of the crop. Now, the problem with here is that, as Elena was alluding, there is a problem of information in here. The tenant, the landlord, he will know the characteristics of the land. He will have some knowledge on how fertile the land is. He will have some understanding on whether there are access to water, for instance, that could be used for irrigation. He will have that knowledge, and that knowledge will be specific to him. On the other hand, the farmer will have specific knowledge about his ability to grow crops. He will have specific knowledge about his networks of potential buyers. So how that information is revealed to each other, it becomes a problem. And how they use this information as well can lead to problems in the contract. So that's an example of a contract that has been established in most parts of the world of these type of contracts, and how you divide the pie. How do we divide the resource, the output? It's typically the economic problem that we are looking at, but also how do you reduce the information asymmetries that there exist between these two agents is another issue that economists have been thinking about when trying to establish an optimal tenancy contract. And then there are farming contracts, and by these I mean contracts that involve the sale of a product. So this would be the sale of product from a farmer to a buyer downstream, and this buyer can be a retailer, can be a processor of food, can be directly the consumer. So there's different types of farming contracts, but typically, they involve selling a commodity. Now, in here, the problem is what is the price, and maybe also whether the buyer gives credits to the farmer, whether the buyer, and how much control does the buyer wants to have in terms of the quantity and the quality of the product that is provided by the farmer. So these types of farming contracts have been the ones that have been promoted extensively in recent years by different international organizations and by governments as a means to obtain rural development, particularly of smallholder farmers in developing countries in Africa as well. But as you'll see in a minute, I mean, there are problems associated with these contracts that might actually hinder the possibility and the opportunity that these types of contracts have to create wealth in some of the unfortunately poorest regions in the world. One of the problems that there is often in developing countries is that there are not very strong formal institutions that can be used to enforce the contracts. So, so this leads to this distinction between complete contracts and incomplete contracts. And so complete contracts are those for which the mutual commitments, the mutual behaviors that each of the agents involved in the transaction on celebrating the contract, all the commitments are observable by a third party. So that if there's any issue with the contract, if there is any conflict, then a third party will be able to observe all the actions that each agent have done and decide who is right and who is wrong, and sort of find out some sort of compensation so that the contract can be completed. And so by completing a contract, we mean that the transaction is finished, and the buyer, if it's the case of the buyer, gets the product and he pays the price agreed to the seller, the farmer, for instance. But the reality is that a lot of the contracts are, even in countries where there are very sophisticated institutions, often it is often the case that there's some of the commitments that each person has isn't totally observable. And you can think about our own jobs as, I mean, I'm an academic, my university can't observe everything that I do. I mean, I'm now talking to here. I could be just on a coffee shop having a nice time and talking to my friends, and it probably would be very hard for them to actually determine whether I was talking to an academic audience or whether I was talking to my friends over Zoom at this time in the morning. So there are a lot of circumstances where, and in fact, some economists argue that there's no such thing as a complete contract ever. Because there's always parts of the behavior that are not observable by anyone. So this leads to some problems, because if it's not possible to observe and verify all the elements of a contract, then it might be impossible to contract. So there needs to be some other mechanisms that make the contract enforceable. So we know that this has been happening in most parts of the world. So it's not only laws that make contracts complete. There are sometimes informal relationships, social norms. There's our pride. There's our trust in each other that actually lead us to do what we're supposed to do, even if it's not going to be observable. And it goes back to these stories of honor and what do we do, what we're supposed to do, regardless of who's observing us or not. And all cultures have these ideas of what do you do when all of a sudden, if you had this ring that would make you disappear, would you do the same actions or not? And in fact, I mean, most of us, and in fact, experiments that my colleagues and I have been running suggest that in most cases, people do the right thing. So yes, a lot of the conditions that to have contracts working are not verifiable, but still those contracts in most cases work fine. But anyway, so just to kind of give you an idea, there's a particular type of contract that economists, particularly agricultural economists, have been particularly focusing at recently, is this idea of a relational contract. So, and by a relational contract, we mean a contract that is celebrated between people that have a relationship that they keep meeting often. And in this case, what characterizes a relational contract, which often overcome some of the issues that limit incomplete contracts, are the fact that there is repeated interaction between parties, which is essential to build trust. There's often unwritten contracts, so it's handshake type of arrangements. There's implicit obligations, not explicit obligations. Typically, in legal contracts, there's explicit obligations. We have a set of written rules that and obligations that we put. In this case, it's not often the case. But unfortunately, one of the the drawbacks of these incomplete contracts or these relational contracts is that they are prone to default. So often one of the parties fails to deliver. And we need to distinguish failing to deliver for the reasons that Elena was talking to us about. I mean, if I have a crop failure, I don't have anything to deliver. I mean, so yes, I was obliged to sell you all my maize crop, but I'm sorry, I don't have anything. I mean, I lost it. So that's obviously a situation where there's a justification for the default. But unfortunately, also sometimes what happens is that when there is a crisis like that, I mean, there's a drought, there's always farmers that actually keep their crops. And for those farmers, all of a sudden the value of their product increases substantially. So it might be that actually they have an opportunity to sell for higher than it was on the contracts. And often they will do that. So let's not be just naive about these things. I mean, farmers obviously take advantage of the situation they also are. So we need to think about that as well. So that leads to these problems that are prevalent in most contracts, regardless of whether they are complete or incomplete. There is moral hazards, which is exactly what I was kind of describing. It occurs on when agents have an hidden action after the contract that may affect the other agent. So this term comes from insurance, and suppose that in an insurance contract, we are supposed to take every action to prevent the accident from happening. So if you have a car insurance, you're supposed to drive following the rules of the road. You're supposed to have to take precaution if you not speed in days where it's raining a lot. All those things. So you have that moral obligation to the insurer. But of course, if you are reckless and you have an accident because you are reckless, then you are sort of facing a problem of moral hazard. And in fact, if the insurance can prove that you were reckless, then of course they have the right not to pay the insurance that you paid for and not compensate you. So this happens unfortunately quite commonly in a lot of situations. So that's one problem is when our actions are not visible, what can happen? The other problem that is also emerging in contracting is adverse selection. That means that the agent contracting doesn't reveal completely his ability to actually do the task that he's supposed to do. And this is very problematic in agricultural contracts. So if a farmer enters a farmer pool, but he doesn't have the ability to produce, say he commits to produce strawberries, but he doesn't know how to produce strawberries. He's never done that before. But he's just thought, well, there's good money on this, why not? And then of course he can't complete the contract. So obviously, for the buyer needs to be able to force the agent to reveal his true ability to do the work that he's supposed to do. So these problems are problems that are prevalent in agriculture, and somehow, if they're not addressed, then obviously the contracts won't be able to provide the opportunities and be a means to actually developing the farmer's incomes, but also in the end of the day, the regional development that we hope these contracts will do. Associated particularly to moral hazard is the problem of side selling and price default, which is quite common in Africa. I mean, this student of mine from Ghana was looking at this in the vegetables markets in Ghana, and we did find that it was quite common for farmers to whenever they realized that their crop had more value than what they had contracted, they would sell to the first person that would come to the farm. Now, there are reasons for this. It might be that people are not doing this because they're just bad people. Often, as Elena was also saying, sometimes is the lack of infrastructure that leads to these things. I mean, if a farmer doesn't have the capacity to store the product, and he has a crop, particularly a vegetable crop that perishes quite quickly, and if somehow the buyer for some reason doesn't show up on the timing that was supposed to show up, he will lose. He'll risk lose all the crop. So if somebody else comes up and says, look, I can take your crop today, you know, he probably will do that just because he doesn't know whether the buyer comes or not, because that's another problem that there is. That is this, again, infrastructure is sometimes not ideal. So it might be that the buyer wasn't showing up because, you know, there was some problems in the road or something. So all of these elements sometimes lead to these problems. But side selling is an issue that often prevents the participation of particularly smallholder farmers in more high value supply chains. But also what we interestingly we start seeing, and now my student Cosmos saw a bit, was price defaulting. And this is when buyers actually either don't show up, or when they show up, they impose a lower price than was originally agreed. And there is some suggestion that this is becoming more of an issue than side selling. And actually that might lead to some of the findings that Elena was having, that farmers apparently are on a poverty trap, and maybe surprisingly some of the farmers are the ones that are more hunger, although they produce food. So I think this is something that is being recognized and an issue, and not only in developing countries. This is becoming an issue in developed countries like England and the US as well, and this is associated to what Elena also was referring, which is market power. What happened in the last 20 years was a concentration of power, concentration of businesses at both downstream from the farm, but also upstream. So there's less suppliers of seed or even tractors than there used to be 20 years ago. There's less manufacturers, butchers, mills for cereals, etc., than there used to be 20 years ago. So this concentration is leading to oligopsony and sometimes oligopoly kind of conditions, which again, sort of market power that often leads farmers to pay more for inputs and get less for outputs. And so this is becoming something that is becoming increasingly recognized. So what are the benefits of contract farming? First, I mean, as I said in the beginning, this has been an instrument that has been suggested and proposed by the World Bank, by FAO, to increase farmers' incomes in developing countries. So again, the idea is that you have a more stable income, you reduce uncertainty. Some of these farmers contracts include provision of credit, provision of inputs. So that is a way, in principle, that it would be all the good things that we know would benefit farmers. So there's the potential to increase farmers. There's also, through price assurances, farmers can have better access to credit markets. There could be potentially spillover effects for the local economy. So farmers will have more increased productivity, so they might need to hire extra help to tile the land and to then do the cropping. So that could be a spillover to the region. They could again have access to inputs and new technology, and they could also potentially be included on the suppliers pool for international retailers and manufacturers, which would pay more than domestic supply networks, suppliers networks would. So this is the potential benefits. But because of the issues that I was telling you regarding moral laws and adverse selection, unfortunately, some of these benefits are not really being accrued. And recent work has been really questioning these benefits that were, and we're kind of finding that some of the reports on the benefits in the past maybe didn't select the best samples. Maybe they're not talking to older people. Maybe the instruments that they were using to quantify these benefits were not the appropriate. There's issues that have been raised in terms of identification of the variables that allow us to measure these benefits. So really we need to look at this more seriously. One of the problems is what I was talking to you. There's some evidence of hold up. So this relationship becomes too dependent, and dependency leads to abuse often. There's also these issues that I was talking about of buyers' oligopsony, so buyers having the power to fix the prices and reduce the prices. Some of the contracts may be leading to environmental degradation and often also to child labor. And there's some evidence that that was happening, particularly in India with environmental degradation and elsewhere with child labor, which obviously is not ideal and often doesn't lead to improvements. And I'm just going to wrap up now. Other recent reviews from Bellemare and Bloem, but also by Mencken and Bellemare. This second study was a study comparing 6 countries in Africa, where only on 2 of them they could have, they found clear evidence that contracts were benefiting the farmers. In all of them, they benefited some farmers that actually had already good conditions anyway, but not necessarily lifted those that needed to be lifted. So a lot of questions that need to be addressed still. So just to conclude, contract farming is a form of contracts celebrated typically between a buyer that wants to source product from farms and use it to add value, either selling to consumers directly, to retail or to the food services. But there are issues associated to the incompleteness of contracts, but also associated to moral hazard and adverse selection. And these might lead to side selling and price default. And if there is extended side selling and price default, then the contracts may fail and their benefits might not be captured. They can potentially improve farmers' incomes, but we need to be careful on creating the right institutions. And I think the ones that Elena was talking about are certainly interesting to consider. The concerns are mainly associated to hold up and oligopsony, and so these can actually limit the positive effects that contracting has. So a lot of work needs to be done and to explore this, but I think there's some of the suggestions and findings that Elena was sharing with us, and I'm sure that we can sort of discuss our opportunities. One of the things that I think is interesting is the use of digital platforms to put farmers directly in contact with consumers. I think establishing these networks, I think, is going to be something exciting in the future. Also, these alternative market channels, not only traditionally retailers and food service. There's public procurement. There's all sorts of things that we can do, but also we need probably to invest in infrastructure to make sure that some of the opportunities are captured. So that's sort of what I wanted to share. Thank you so much for this opportunity to reflect, and I gave you more of a theoretical perspective on this, but I think it complements quite nicely with the more practical work that Katur and Elena shared before me. So thank you. Yes. If you have any, please shoot.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Montero. Yeah, we're going to have the Q&A once we hear from the practitioners, because I think our 3 presenters are from the academic backgrounds mostly. So we're now going to hear about from the practitioner's point of view, which will be presented by Ibu Masrurah and Nadir Ulad as well. The 2 of you will present. 20 minutes on the clock, and after the final presentations, then we're going to open the Q&A sessions. And just to remind everyone, you can participate in our Q&A sessions by choosing the raise hand button, or put your questions on the chat box. Starting right now, we are already open the chat box. All right, Ibu Masrurah or Nadir, you can present your presentations, and 20 minutes on the clock. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Maybe Mr. Olat Nadir, please. Nadir. Oh, okay, okay, I'm first. Yeah. How to share the
I think we have made Ibu as the co-host. So if you can just click on the share screen, Ibu.
Okay. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you for Gajah Mada University and Namibia University. Good afternoon, and also thank you for all speakers and the audience. Nice to meet you here. Today, I will not give the heavy subject. I will share about my experience during I doing my business. The topic today is the collaboration and contract with foreign buyer experience from Jogja Export Craft, case Belindo. Let me introduce my company first. My company name is CV Belindo International. With my Suara Basket branch, we are focused on creating environmentally friendly home decoration product. Local craftsmen are involved in our production line. This is our vision. We aim to grow our business from local to global by continuing to improve social welfare to our local people. This is our crafter. All of our products are 100% handmade and utilizing natural materials sourced locally. We work with local craftsmen located in Wates, Kulon Progo, Yogyakarta, Indonesia. They have a weaving skill to produce the home decoration product. This is our product, 100% handmade, unique, environmentally friendly products. As the small medium enterprises, I realized that I have so many problems when I want to go global. So today I will share 5 issues for an SMEs. 1, how to find the buyer. 2, how to deal the business. 3, how to prepare the product. 4, how to do the shipment. And 5, how to handle after sales. We go to the first issues, how to find the buyer. There are so many ways to find the buyers, but today I will give you 5 ways to find the buyer. I have a website, marketplace, exhibition, government, and association. In the modern age, people are using their mobile phones more and more to browse the internet, find out about business, and even buy products and services. With a website, customers can easily access information about your business. They can see what products or service you sell, your price, your location, and much more. Also with the marketplace, online marketplace allow you to sell goods without setting up your own website. eBay and Amazon are examples of well-established marketplace. We can use that. We can use these tools to promote our products or service because we can reduce financial thing to promote our company. And exhibition. Before pandemic, we can join the exhibition offline. But since pandemic, there's no offline exhibition. But don't worry because there's many program about international virtual exhibition. The benefit of exhibition include raise awareness, meet in person, and also networking. With the join international virtual exhibition, you can show the world that the company or your business still exists. Government and association. When I start to go global, I decided to join with the association which connect with international market. Because the association is a forum for SMA to gain access to information about business development opportunities. It also helps assisting small business enterprise to grow by providing information and resources that match their specific need. The association is also a bridge between SMEs and the government so that the aspiration of SMEs can be delivered to the government. I joined with the Belindo Association, which is developed by Mr. Nadir Aulat Omar, and Belindo helping SMEs to grow locally, expand into new markets, and remain competitive in an increasingly complex and evolving global marketplace. I also cooperate with government. Why government? In the current knowledge-based economy, small enterprise become one of the most significant drivers of economic development, employment creation, and poverty reduction. Government plays a crucial role in small and medium-sized enterprise. They can support with grants, research centers, regulation, and tax incentives. Government can cooperate with association to support us as an SMA for international exhibition. And without them, maybe I cannot go global easily. For more information about Belindo Association, Mr. Nadir will represent after my presentation. Or you can search all information about Belindo Association on the website www.belindo.au. And the second is how to deal the business. Many companies use product catalog to give consumer the chance to see a small sample of products in person. When you think that product description and image file to explain the product, a sample can help the buyer in understanding the product better. Product sample play a crucial role in the buyer's buying decision. This is because sample provides a close image of the product and helps in winning over the buyer confidence. Be clear about the cost of the sample before promising the buyer that you will provide the product sample. So when you get the buyer and they ask about the product sample, give them the best product you made. After product sample, pricing is the important competitive weapon which influence companies' success in foreign markets. By better understanding international market environment, a company can more effectively set price and be competitive. Maybe at that time, buyer will compare your price with another company or other's country. But don't worry, if you're sure that you have a good product with a good quality, you can tell them that I give you the best price with the good quality. You can give them price with FOB, freight on board, CNE, cost and freight, and cost insurance and freight. This is a time of payment after product sample. Price, we go to the term of payment. Export payment terms are a crucial part of international trade, based on which exporters and this is for about term of payment. Number one, I'm sorry, this is not LCL, but LC, letter of credit, cash against document, TT, and B2B payment. You can choose one of them based on your negotiation with the buyer. This is the information. And next issues is how to prepare the product. For SMA, product quality and delivery time is the most important things. And how we prepare the product. It's about material, packaging, and how to finish the order. Material preparation is the most important things in product preparation. To meet the needs of raw materials, we can ask for help from the university university as an educational institution such as UGM or University of Namibia, which provides a lot of information about the location of raw materials and local craftsmen, which are usually found in research journal about regional potential. By utilizing this research, SMA can shorten the time for product preparation. And also for packaging. Regarding good packaging, we can use information from journal issued by universities such as Gajah Mada University or Namibia University. The last importance is the accuracy of product deadlines. You have to create a matter work schedule complete with the deadline of the product. In our case, there are several things to consider when making a deal, such as the weather and planting season. The weather is very influential because the drying process of our products is very dependent on the weather. Most of our craftsmen are farmers. So when the planting season arrives, they will ask for permission to grow crops, which often causes order to be delayed. So the solution, like I said before, to create a mature work schedule complete with the deadline of the product. And next issues, how to do the shipment. There's two ways, LCL, less than container load, and FCL, full container load. The main difference between FCL and LCL is that the buyer is sharing space in a container for an LCL shipment compared to renting the full container space under an FCL agreement. Usually for SMA, we consolidation with the LCL. Last but not least, how to handle after sales. The importance of after sales service reflects your image and professionalism, demonstrates your ability to handle your customer problem and to solve them. It is your duty to do everything possible to satisfy your customer regardless of the situation. Therefore, the management of your after sales service must be fluid, organized, and optimal. I will give you 4 key elements to managing your after sales service. There are shipment monitoring, payment monitoring, and keep your customer well informed, and complaint management. I will give you my PPT, and I think for me it's enough. Thank you for attending this presentation. Now, Mr. Nadir, you can presentation about Belindo Association.
Okay, thank you, Bu Masrullah. So, Mr. Nadir, are you joining us? Yeah, I still cannot contact Mr. Nadir. Can I try again, Mr. Nadir? Would you like to present about Belindo Association then?
I think he's here. I saw his name.
Yeah, it's here. His is just not responding. That's why I think I already messaged him as well. So yeah, shall we proceed then to the Q&A, or Ibu Masrullah, while I'm reminding our participants, if you could contact Mr. Nadir whether he wants to present about Belindo. So yeah, everyone. So we already have like 3 presentations from 3 remarkable presenters, and one presenter just now from Ibu Masrullah, her experience as the practitioners, and also as the owner of the SMEs herself, which is very valuable to all of us, of course, and to add on into our discussions later on. All right then, so we're supposed to have one more presenter, Mr. Nadir, to explain about the SMEs Associations of Belindo Association. But just to remind everyone, while we're waiting for Mr. Nadir's confirmation, you can start putting your questions on the chat box and or choose the raise hand button if you would like to ask questions and participate in our Q&A sessions, which will open very soon once we get the confirmation from Mr. Nadir. Okay. All right. Yeah. Is there any confirmation, Ibu Masullah, maybe, or maybe
I tried, but
it's not responding? Yeah,
yeah.
that is one. Okay, right. So why don't I open the Q&A sessions first, and let's see if Mr. Nadir is going to respond our message to him. Right. So yeah, I will open the Q&A sessions now. So again, just to remind everyone to raise their hands or put their questions on the chat box. So I would like to read the first questions for Dr. Monteiro. Wait, let me just, well, I would like, yeah, I think I'm just going to read the first questions to Dr. Diego Monteiro. The question is, do you think the contract farming problem also found in developing countries? I'm wondering whether the side selling and contract default are also similar to problem in developing countries. I'm wondering whether the side selling and contract default are also similar to problem in developing countries. Sorry, repeating. And to Dr. Elena, the questions for you, Doctor. So the government failures sometimes happen in this contract farming. Just like Professor Chatur mentioned, the government fails to keep the promise. How to reduce this possibility of government failure in this case? Is there any penalty for the government? And the question, the two questions was delivered from Sugia from PSEKP. So I think I will like to have Dr. Diego to respond for the questions about whether it's possible there's a similar pattern for the developing countries, and then for Dr. Elena is regarding the government failure. Thank you.
Right. I mean, it's not very clear to me what you're asking, if this is prevalent in developing countries as well as developed countries, or only on developing countries. What seems to me is that it is an issue in developing countries, and it is particularly an issue when you're trying to have building sort of agribusiness, which can be sort of a way to add value to regions, and so, for instance, in the case of Ghana, which is the one that I know a bit better than others, just because my student was from there, and he constantly told me that the government actually invested, also in international investors, on processing plants, namely for tomato, because the regions or some of the regions in Ghana had high potential for the production of tomato, but then there was always a problem with assuring enough supply of tomatoes for processing. And often the case that he was telling me is that there used to be lots of crop failures and farmers that wouldn't be able to deliver for one reason or another the product. And these types of processing plants, they need, at least on the time that they're operating, they need a constant flow of products, because each day that they stop, they will lose money. And therefore, then it creates sort of a vicious circuit in that the farmers are not able to provide to these plants the quantities and the qualities that they require. And because of that, they start getting trouble, the processing plants, and they start paying less to the farmers, and that creates just a circle that, in the end of the day, all the farms eventually, the farmers don't get the money they should get, but also in the end, also these processing plants need to close. So Ghana has 2 or 3 huge plants that could be generating a lot of income to farmers, but also to other employees and etc. But then in the end of the day, get closed. So this is a problem that exists. I mean, I have colleagues from the States that work in Africa in general with other type of processing of soya, for instance, and all that. And that's something that is a problem. Now, I think what sometimes we forget is what is the root of this problem. And it can be, again, lack of infrastructure, lack of capacity for farmers to produce what is supposed to be produced. Again, there might be problems in terms of even corruption in the different levels of supply chain. So that's an issue that seems to be prevailing. What is interesting now is that there's some evidence more recently that these type of behaviors, maybe not as explicit as in developing countries, but they are still emerging in here in Europe and sometimes in America as well. So recently, I found that a retailer actually it's a retailer with Portuguese capital operating in Poland. They've been sued by the Polish government because they were renegotiating contracts after the supply of I think it was fruits or vegetables, something like that. So these things are problematic, and partly, as I said, I mean, I think it's the concentration of market power in certain parts of the supply chain seems to have some impact. There's also some stories that emerged recently of similar situations with international buyers putting pressure on prices for cocoa producers and coffee as well in Africa and elsewhere. So this seems to be an issue that is not entirely sorted and can have clear effects. One thing that I think it's interesting is what the latest speaker was telling us about. Is one way to countervail this is to try to find other ways to diversify your products first. I mean, so obviously the farmer, some of the craftsmen that Matsuri was talking about, they are also farmers. So if those farmers have another activity that can sort of provide some income, then it might be that they are not so dependent on just one buyer, and this can actually be an opportunity to address the market. But also, there's increasingly some really interesting experiences of local, say, coffee shops in the UK and elsewhere that directly buy from a cooperative of coffee suppliers elsewhere. There's always the problem of how do you get the product from one place to another. But I think there are really interesting sort of solutions that are starting to emerge, even in terms of finance, that I think are things that we need to be paying attention. So yes, there is on that sort of traditional transaction, there are still some issues, some associated to market power, some to other features of markets. But I think there's also some interesting opportunities to celebrate other types of contracts. And actually, I was kind of wanting to know a bit more about what problems are you having, Mazuros, about contracting with your suppliers, but also how you contract with your buyers. So I think that I mean, hearing more about that, I think would be really interesting.
All right, thank you, Dr. Montero. I've noted your questions for Ibu Masruro, so we will definitely hear her answers very soon. Yeah, I would like Dr. Elina first to answer the second question about the government failure.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this question. It's I like it. The challenge is how is the penalty for the government failure? Question of whether there is penalty for the government. Look, there is argument that the so-called logic of market failure needs government interventions because markets fail because of also institutional weaknesses that are there. They are not, you don't have right mechanisms in place first, because if there are no, I think there needs to be a line between where the government ends and where the market intervention will begin, because combining the two, I think that is where the problem comes in. Now, what penalty is there for government failure? Well, it's a question I cannot provide an answer to in terms of what penalty is there when governments fail. But of course, the penalty, I'll say there are indirect penalties. They're indirect penalties because if the right mechanisms are not in place, for example, in that case, it reflects on the government in a negative way, because you have farmers in the country, or small-scale farmers or medium-scale farmers in the country who are not producing, where there's no productivity in the country, no food production, you have citizens that are in stress situation, food insecurity. You cannot work while you're hungry, and that affects the economy of the country, and that has a reflection on the government as well. So I think that's an indirect penalty for the government to look at these things. That's how I put it. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Elena, for your answer. So can I go to Ibu Masrurah? I think, yeah, it's interesting.
May I join?
Oh, yes, Pak Catur, sorry.
Yeah, well, it's mentioned about the contract between government and farmer. I think that's a good idea, as government also experienced failure, right? And, I don't have any, reference on them, but usually, penalty will be in the form of losing trust from the farmer. So it will be difficult for the government to introduce new program once farmer was cheated. So this is a lesson for the government to formulate new program completely. Like, usually they giving farmer a seed or fertilizer down to the marketing of the product. Otherwise, effort to increase the farmer income will be failed, and any other new program from the government will be farmer will not follow the program if they were cheated at the first time. So that, I think that's I don't know, is that direct or indirect penalty to the government?
Okay, so it's like a game theory. Once you cheat it,
yes,
then
right. Yeah.
you will get zero profit because you have that a bad track record. I'm sorry, Dr. Monteiro, would you like to say something?
Yes, I think the problem of government failure is a big one, and it's often neglected. I think we normally focus on market failures and use that as a means to say, well, markets don't work, so let's just try to figure out another governance. And I think we need to. That's a really good point. We need to acknowledge that governments fail, and again, partly is much as markets. If there is too much concentration of power, then typically people will abuse, regardless of whether they are private or public servants or public organizations. So one of the issues is the lack of scrutiny and the lack of opportunity. So that's what I think it's really important to kind of have different types of institutions that can sort of compete in one way or another. So one way potentially to use this is if you're having agricultural produce, and if the government can buy some of that produce through programs that buy produce for schools, for instance, but at the same time there's also commercial agents, private agents that are buying the same product, say for restaurants, then obviously one is sort of controlling the other, and there could be more opportunities for the farmer as well. But again, let's not forget that the farmer is not an angel. I mean, the farmer will also abuse if he can. I mean, I think the only way that this works is if each agent has a bit of has to be considerate for the other ones, and the only way to do that is to make sure that none of them has complete power, because typically the problems come from if one agent thinks that he can get away with it, get away with either sort of moral hazard or adverse selection issues, then obviously they will do. So I think this kind of keeping checks and balances at the end of the day, I think are the way to do this. And I think this is the problem that we are facing nowadays. I mean, a lot of governments and businesses don't really think that they need to coexist with other organizations. They don't exist alone.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Dr. Montero. There's actually, okay, so I'm going to go to Ibu Masrurah to share her experience, but there are actually one question that's related actually. It's about the gender issues, especially in the farming and then the SMEs as well. Like, although when I saw Pak Catur's slides, all of the, I think most of the slides consists of women farmers, which I think is a good picture. But then the issue with gender, there's still unequal opportunities for them, well, quote unquote, in the SMEs and also in the agricultural sector. So yeah, I think if I can ask Ibu Masrurah, you as a practitioner and you're a female, and as a gender economist myself as well, I think the current literature is still highly debating about the bottleneck issues for women participations in SMEs, like getting the financial and the loan from the banking system, given that they do not have prior track records. So Catur says if you have a bad track records, you will penalize. But for those who still hasn't got the first experience, and they also face the same issues, and they do not have the capacity or maybe the ability to get a loan to start the SMEs in the first place. Because they do not have track record, and maybe it's also related to what Dr. Montero just mentioned. The bank might perhaps afraid that this new female debtor will be default in the future, so they kind of avoiding of adverse selection. So, Ibu Masrurah, would you like to share with us, you as a female, how did you make the contract, and how did you get involved in this SMEs?
Thank you, Ma, for the question. For my experience, for get the funding, financial things for the bank didn't see the gender.
Okay.
They see about our business. They will come to our workshop and show the activity, and they will give us the apa namanya penawaran
offer
credit offer.
So, but did you start with Belindo, or did you start on your own in the first place?
I start with the Belindo and start with the SMA. I have a business, and I join with the Belindo when I start to go global, because I know that if I doing by myself without collaboration, it's very difficult for an SMA.
Okay, so do you think the collaboration help you a lot?
Yes.
For your SMEs.
Yeah, because when I collaborate with the association, and association cooperate with the government, they have a program and support us to go to promote our product or business with an expo, with an international expo. And that time we can promote our product or our service to the world.
Okay, right. So the bottom line, or I think the most, I think one important message in here, I think it's good if you collaborate with an association. I think it's gonna help your your business to move forward and give you more opportunities and international opportunities. All right, thank you, Ibu Masrurah. Pak Catur, we have a questions for you actually. So the questions comes from Ibu Tri Wijayanti from BRAIN. She asks you, many agricultural commodities in Indonesia are grown on government project basis, and many of them do not have processing unit or downstream industries. Even if there is, it cannot absorb all production. On the other hand, the middleman bids at a low price. Moreover, when the institutions is in the village or region, they are unable to facilitate to solve the problem because of bureaucratic problem, corruption, capital, or limited human resource problem. So in your 2 cents, Pak Catur, how to overcome this complex issue?
Oh, thank you. That's not a simple question.
Okay.
But I found that there are many ways of farmers groups and also farmer collaborate with the process of themselves. They can reduce that kind of problem. You know that when they get together and then they have a bigger size of product, then they can, try to deal with the processor as well. Okay, so I think if the farmer themselves and also the government try to encourage this kind of farmer group, either cooperative or just a group, and they can keep the promise of about the size, the quality, and the time, and that kind of quality requirement, then they will have a better position and better deal with the processor actually. So it's true, like Ibu Masrurah mentioned, lonely farmer or lonely crafter is very difficult to go global. But also, even though we are living in a new technology, we know that it's not in the farmers domain for using gadget to sell the produce online. I think we need a farmer group, or we need a very good entrepreneur who can help a farmer group to expand the access to the processor and also to the market.
Okay, thank you, Pak Catur. I think it's interesting if we can proceed on that topic as well. But I would like to invite Bapak Taryono to our discussion session.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Moderators. First, I would like to ask to Dr. Montero. I think in the case of Indonesia, there are different contract farming system, but I can divide into two. One is, I call it normally in the, in the food growers, they contract the land. Yeah, they contract. They are contracting the land for somebody else. But in the case of estate crop, normally we call it the product contract farming. Means that the industry, they will buy the product from the farmers. Because in the 83, 87, I think, the government introduced the NEST program. So it is about the nuclear estate system, I think. When the industry, especially for estate crop, they should they should work together with the farmers as producers. Do you think that such kind of product contracting system can be also introduced to the to the land contracting farmers? Because I think it is will be more beneficial to the growers, to the farmers. And the second, about the government failure. I think the Indonesian government in the last 5 years, they introduced about farmers insurance. The government will take the responsible, theoretically, to the farmers' failure, especially during the, especially for the harvesting failure. And nowadays, I saw there are, it is, I think the last question is to Pak Catur. We saw that there are now so many, so many hubs, so many different, different
marketplace,
young people who develop a kind of e-commerce like Tani Hub and different things. And I think even also Sonjo, how we can help the farmers and then optimally to sell the product through this kind of hub. I think this is the three question or suggestion that I would like to raise. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Pak Taryono. Dr. Montero, would you like to give your comments?
Well, thank you. So these are really great questions, and I know that in different governments do different types of support systems that are quite complementary of market-based, and I think that's what some of the issues that I was suggesting. I don't know the situation of tenancy agreements in your country. It is, however, has been extendedly studied. I mean, the problem sometimes that there is whether governments really. The problem that there is and this has been studied in terms of different types of game theory type of models. What seems to happen is that when there is a reasonable divide of the output of the farm, there tends to be more stable relationships and less issues of compliance with the contracts. It's typically when either the farmer or the landlord tends to be a bit more abusive that the relationships can break and things can happen. So I think what the government could do, similar to potentially these contract farming situations, is be vigilant and somehow make sure that neither the tenant nor the landlord can actually abuse of that position with the other. But I think what you were suggesting there in terms of different types of organizations that can sort of cooperate and sort of how do we actually foster cooperation and what is the role of government on fostering that cooperation? I think that's really what I think it could be the best avenue. So maybe rather than the government shooting too much is making sure that he sets up a framework where cooperation is compensated and there's more benefits from cooperation than from some competition. That said, I mean, we need to be careful because often a bit of competition is actually important, not the negative competition that basically makes us too greedy or too aggressive to each other. But the competition that makes us improve all the time is certainly needed. So we need to kind of balance the insurances that we have with some level of motivation to keep growing and to keep us on our toes. That's sort of a nice balance between cooperation on things that are common goods and maybe competition on more that lead us to improve situations. I think this is where these contracts also need to have those elements there. And some of these might be these social protection insurances that Elena was talking about. Maybe the government needs to make sure that there is some sort of a floor so that people don't totally fall on poverty, but at the same time, they cannot be too cozy in the sense that they cannot be too confident that it doesn't really matter how competent they are, things will always sort out. I think that is where that balance between giving some protection, but don't give people too much assurances is often hard to get. But I think that's where we should probably move forward in these markets, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Montero. Pak Catur.
Yeah, great. I agree with Pak Taryono that there's a new trend now in Indonesia where the young people, the youth, they use the technology to process even the agricultural product like hub, and also there is any other young farmers group who really, help the farmer. But see, they use the technology first, and the second they use a group so that they can have a bigger size. If we can train many more young, entrepreneurs who, their heart is gone to the farmers, so I think that will be a fruitful and also better, promising, for the farmer to have more a wider marketplace. Okay, and especially during in this online marketplace. Just like, they can sell to other places, even with a small bag of onion from Brebes in Central Java, and they can send it to other places. That's really nice. That's one of the example. I heard that our colleague from IBB Institute did also develop this kind of system to help, young farmers to get together with a farmer group to
Tani Center, Bapak.
Yeah, the Tani Center, and also I think
I think Tani Hub is more powerful than.
Yeah, well,
and Sonjo I think is also better.
Yeah, some of them focus on agriculture, and some of them also on social, like Sonjo. So yeah. I think if we have a younger who use the power of IT, I think it will be a good sign for our agricultural sector. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Professor Chatra. Dr. Montero?
No, I think I just comment a bit more on what Katul has just said. I think one thing that is really interesting is how these digital platform apps are really addressing a lot of the issues that governments have been trying to do for a long time and haven't been able to sort that out. So the examples that Katur was describing are really interesting. I know that when I was there in Indonesia some time ago, I learned about how extension is often done very effectively through mobile devices and all that. I think that's really exciting to see how this is happening. I think as in universities and education institutions, we also need to kind of jump on board on this as we could have been. So how can we involve the knowledge institution as well on this very exciting type of dynamic that is being created? I think it's something that we need to think about and start doing it more. But also the other thing that I think it's exciting is how these basically sort of private sector initiatives are putting consumers and farmers closer together. So I know of a friend of mine in Portugal that is creating a cooperative between his farm and then consumers that buy directly from his farm through a community supported agriculture type of scheme, where he sells directly and they know what is being produced. Some of them can actually come up and to the farm and help during crop season. So I think this bringing people, particularly urban dwellers, to the farm and understand that we all depend on each other. I think that's something that digital platforms have enabled, these short circuits, learning where your food comes from, learning the difficulties that farmers face, approaching and sharing ideas and solutions is really interesting. We know examples also in Africa where people use mobile to send money to each other. I think that this is a really interesting space, and it's an area that I think Indonesia could potentially collaborate more effectively with in Namibia and maybe other African countries on trying to really kind of empower smallholder farmers to take sort of responsibility for themselves, but also get the support they need to develop themselves. I think that's something that I think we need to kind of find new models, because some of the old models of just supporting and sending subsidies potentially didn't work as much as we would like to think they would. So very exciting sort of time, actually.
All right, thank you, Dr. Montero. Pak Catur, any comments on
I
that?
wonder, can I ask to Elina? I guess when we're talking about small farmer in Indonesia, it's quite different from small farmer in Africa. I guess in terms of size.
That's what. That was what I was wondering as well. How about in Africa, especially maybe in Namibia case, Elina? Because I was also wondering how about the digital transformations or maybe digital disruption may also help, or maybe it's still a challenge for farmers in Africa. Would you enlighten us here, Dr. Elina?
Yeah, of course, that's a challenge, a big challenge when it comes to talk about digital access or access to technology, because if you look at many small-scale farmers, actually there's a challenge there in terms of this access to technology and things. So it will take time to get there, because like I said, there needs to be, instead of, for example, saying there is access to technology, or there is what, they still training, they still need to train on how to use that, even if it comes to date. So that's, for example, with when in the past when I did some of the interviews I made with the small scale farmers, access to information was a big challenge. You would find that some of the information that, for example, is on the Agricultural Bank of Namibia's website, that they provide this kind of funding here, and they have no information about that. I would think, okay, is this an issue of, it could be an issue of, poor marketing maybe of products that are available, but also just the access to resources that could make it easy for them to be aware of this information is another thing. So that is one of the challenges when it comes to to access technology for farmers as well.
And if we can be enlightened as well, Elina. So from your presentation, so what I take is that during the COVID, there's been an absence of social protections for farmers. So I was actually wondering, so how then they cope with the current situations then?
Of course, it's not to say there is nothing. There are interventions that the government has put in place. The point here is that with the current interventions in place, you're saying, because that's why I mentioned that the social protection functions, we're talking of 4 functions: a promotive, protective, preventive function, and the transformative function. But you would find, for example, that only 1 or 2 taken into account. Of course, that works up to maybe 50%. What would take care of the other 50%? So, look, like Diego said, farmers themselves are also not angels. It's a matter of creating a relationship that works with what is currently available, right? And also working towards improving the current environment, and not just saying, okay, we have this, it's working well. Let's look at the challenges later, or let's see how we can deal with the challenges, but making sure that all the social protection functions are present. So how are they coping? Well, for example, in some of the irrigation schemes with some of the small-scale farmers, because I mostly focused on the crop farmers where they are, you'd find the government has tried to put in some type of limited access to water, which may not always be available, sometimes available. So that works. It's kind of a way to cope from time to time, but it just may be not sustainable, right? So with the current interventions, with the little that is said, that's how they cope.
All right, interesting. So I think before I ask one final questions to each of our speakers, from Ibu Masrurah, I would like to hear Ibu Masrurah experience as well regarding the COVID situations, Ibu, whether we can learn something as well from the Indonesian case, from the practitioners. Is there any enough support from the government or not, so that we can compare with the Namibian case as well? As a practitioner, as the one who involved in the field. Ibu Masrurah?
Yeah, since during the pandemic, we have to change our business model. Before pandemic, I focused on the export, but everything changed after pandemic come, and I use every tools for promote my product. I still have one buyers. They still order my products, but we have problems with the container. The container's price is very high. So I receive the order from the domestic market, and it's because domestic market. And government in Yogyakarta, governor have a program to support a with PT Pos Indonesia. They have a program free delivery to our. So my buyer can buy product, and we can send the products with the seed to free. Okay. So in here in Yogyakarta, I get many support from government to my business.
Okay, thank you, Mas Rurol. So, but definitely it changes the way you do your business, right? Okay, okay, thank you. Dr. Montero, please.
Yes, I was just kind of reflecting a bit on what Elena was saying, and acknowledging that she works in a place where some of the conditions to farming are pretty dire. Desertic or semi-desertic areas are very challenging. Again, we know that water is the source of life, and when there's not water, it's really hard to produce anything. And what I think the problem sometimes is, and I've seen that in my own country, in Portugal, where in the past they kind of in some areas that are not as arid as some parts of Namibia, but they certainly during the summer there's probably 3 months where there's no water in the south of Portugal, which makes it very challenging to produce anything. But what we've seen as well there is that often you sort of try to plant crops that, in our case, was wheat, and some of the regions in the south didn't really had that much ability to actually. The land was not really good for wheat. There were some parts of the region that were good for it. The soils were appropriate, but a lot of that wasn't. But just because there was a need of wheat for bread and all of that, which is a staple product in our diets, they just start producing, and some of these lands unfortunately lost fertility because of that. So I'm kind of wondering if we need to think about crops that are actually suitable for the regions, and that leads me to think about what we call food. Some things that we now assume that are food, maybe maybe they weren't food some times ago, and there were things that were eaten regularly, like 100 years ago in Portugal that are now considered only food for animals. So I think particularly in certain regions of the world, we need to kind of think about these insurances, particularly when on the perspective of climate change that actually might reduce water availability in certain regions. We need to think about that and maybe look at not local resources, and that might provide some decent type of source of protein and other types of macronutrients. We need to think about food in a different way potentially, but also I think we need to understand how farmers can help each other. So don't rely only on government. Obviously, government needs to be there on situations of emergency. but maybe farmers could also cooperate and maybe save some of their crops for situations of emergencies, particularly if they are in regions where it's likely that every so often there will be serious problems of food security. So I think we need to be a bit more creative and find different solutions to these issues. Can be a bit more open-minded about what we consider food and what we don't consider food. And this is just reflections I'm having, looking at the situation in my own country that potentially could be useful for others.
All right, very insightful and very interesting, Dr. Montero. Thank you very much for your comments. But I'm afraid we really run out of the time, so I have to wrap up these plenary sessions. But before I close this session, I would like to ask one more questions to each of our speaker today. Just like the final message for this webinar and to all of our participants, because I'm pretty sure that we will have a series of future webinars in the same topic, and also to enhance and give more support for contract farming farmers and also the SMEs as well. So for each of our speaker, I would like to have your 2 cents, your ideas or your comments. So if you can summarize in 1 sentence, or just a short summary, what would be the most important factors or maybe elements that we need to focus on to have that form of sustainable contract farming, perhaps, or any sustainable policies to support our SMEs, especially in the agricultural sector? So I would like to start with Professor Chatur.
Wow, it's hard.
Oh, it's hard. Really? So it's not an exam problem. So yeah, just your final point. From your point of view, what would be the key elements here?
Well, I would be more optimistic with this current situation. As long as, the government go into the IT thing, and then, keep the farmer group online. And I think that will be a promising direction for helping our farmers. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Professor Chatur. How about Dr. Elina, especially in your experience in Africa?
I would say a truly sustainable reduction in poverty and resources to farming. A truly sustainable reduction in poverty requires a deep investment in rural areas, especially where most of the small-scale farmers live, and a reduction in the instability of food commodity, food security, serious labor market reforms, and secure financing schemes need to be looked at for households where, or for farmers where food is produced. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Elina. Dr. Montero? Dr. Montero, yes.
I know.
Sorry. No worries.
I would say that one key issue is really sharing. Sharing problems, sharing solutions, learning from each other. I think it's key that we realize that a lot of the problems that we are facing are not ours alone, either personally or regionally or nationally. We just had the COP26 meetings here in Glasgow, which is not very far from where I am. And what we saw there is actually, rather than cooperation, people thinking that, their interests prevail over others. I mean, we facing as a human community a huge challenge going to the future. We have huge problems, but I think I'm a believer that if we can sit together as we are over a room, and we can discuss those problems and have some sense of solidarity to each other, and a sense of wanting to learn and wanting to address issues, we can prevail. We've been around for a while as a species. I think we are at our best when we come together to identify issues and to address them. And again, I think there's a lot of experiences that we learn about today that can be shared and can be used, obviously adapting to the circumstances, can be used to inspire and to address the critical issues that we all face.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Montero. Last but not least, from our very own practitioner, Ibu Masruro. So what will be, Ibu, from the message from your experience, what will be the key element to support you particularly, or in particular, to enhance your business?
As an entrepreneur, as an SME, I want to tell that we have to know about our target, and we have to know about our strategy. Like we have to collaborate or cooperate with others, keep growing, and never give up. We have to be active to get information for the others.
Okay, thank you very much, Ibu Masruro, for your very final message for this plenary session. So everyone, that is the end of our discussion session. So if I can just summarize, just a short summary. So about the benefits of contract farming, we've seen that yes, it will be beneficial to enhance farmers' income, but there are challenges. One of which is about asymmetric information, moral hazard, and selection bias as well. But we have opportunities. All the opportunities can also be challenges about providing better social protection, utilizing the digital transformations, and having better infrastructure to support our SMEs. And the final message is about collaboration. What I quote from Dr. Montero, if I can have your quotation, compensating cooperation to motivate cooperation for the common good. So I think that's also the final message from Ibu Masruro. We need collaboration. So I think that will be our future discussions. Hopefully, if Pak Catur and team will have such a webinar again. So everyone, I'm going to make my closing now. I would like to thank all of our participants who have joined us today, especially those who stayed until the end. Thank you all for coming. Thank you to all of our speakers, Dr. Elina, Dr. Montero, Professor Catur, Ibu Masruro, and I think Omar was here, but I think he got some connections problem as well. And thank you all the committees from Pusat Studi Ekonomi Kerakyatan Universitas Gadjah Mada for holding this event and who have assisted me in today's plenary session. So I hope to see you all again in other events held by Universitas Gadjah Mada or even University of Namibia or maybe University of Newcastle. In other events, similar events or maybe other webinars. But until then, I would like to say always stay safe, stay healthy. Remember always to keep the health protocols and regulations in your country. So that's it for me. This is Keisha signing off. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And back to you, Ibu Saka.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you so very much, Mrs. Keisha, and all speakers. Thank you so very much. What a great presentation and discussion led by Mrs. Keisha. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting any of time, let's continue to the next agenda. Next program, we will have two closing remarks from our honorable invited guests. First closing remarks will be delivered by Dr. Jacob Nyambe, the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Commerce, Management and Law of University of Namibia. Please, Dr. Jacob. Dr. Jacob, can you hear my voice? Are you here with us? Dr. Jacob Nyambe.
Just bear with me. I'm trying to. Can you see me now?
Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, let me just take this opportunity to say a few words. I won't take you for long. I know the event has already taken some time. On your side, it should even be, I guess, late in the afternoon, if not approaching evening. I'll start by referring to the words of the Vice Chancellor, Professor Kenneth Matango, who encouraged for the involvement of the private sector in some of the research work that is taking place between the two sister institutions. That I think it's a very commendable exercise that should be pursued. But besides that, of course, I also want to draw from the words of Dr. Tariono, who spoke from the University of Gadjah Mada. I recall he emphasized the fact that, of course, there are constraints that small-scale farmers, in this case from the small business enterprise perspective,
they suffer from a lot of constraints that should be attended to. I mean, it's normal. It's normal for all of us to expect such because these are humans who face difficult challenges that all other businesses go through. But with these words, allow me first to start by thanking the presenters. And I recall we had Dr. Montero, who touched on contract farming. We appreciate the work that you did on that because it enlightened us on a number of issues, especially how the chocolate or cocoa farmers are supporting the industry. Of course, we wish we could have the same here in Namibia to introduce cocoa, but it's unfortunate. I don't know if there's our environmental conditions that don't allow such, or it's because we haven't gone to the level of testing for such, but we appreciate that, of course. Prof. Sugianto as well, he touched again on a number of issues that also have to do with contract farming, telling us about the types of contracts, but of pertinence was more of a relational contract. That is also appreciated. We thank you again for your presentation. Dr. Madila, you also went to the issue of social protection among small-scale farmers. That's quite an interesting, aspect considering where we are with COVID and areas that lies ahead with ensuring that small-scale farmers can remain resilient. Of course, there are others like Dr. Nadia as well, and someone by the name Celestioti, who came to touch on issues to do with identifying the market and so forth. I think that's wonderful for us. These are very practical or quite hands-on types of research that can find a way to influence policy. So we really appreciate your work that you did, sharing with us the knowledge and telling us what needs to be done from a policy perspective. I don't have to leave it there. I need to thank, I think, Professor Mandemele, who has been in contact with us and the University of Gajah. I think we came here because of that type of effort. We also recognize those who have organized this webinar to take place. Thank you for your work. We have done the background work that we couldn't even see and notice, but at least you made it a success. The director of ceremonies, I think, including the moderators who came on board, your work was also commendable. We appreciate what you've done. There are then those who were listening, were asking questions, who are the invited guests. We also want to thank you for coming, for having endured this time attending to this knowledge platform. And we hope that in future you will again join us when we have similar events. From all others that I did not recognize, please let me also thank you. And please continue to look after yourselves in times of COVID until we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jacob. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will continue to next closing remarks by UGM representatives. A few words from the expertise of the Center for Economic Democracy Studies of Universitas Gadjah Mada, Professor Catur Sugianto, please.
Thank you, honorable speakers and also guests. I hope all of you found a fruitful discussion this evening. We discussed very important topics and very relevant to Indonesian and also to Namibia, I hope. As Mr. Taryono mentioned in the opening, SME contribute to a large share in labor absorption and also in the business in general. I hope this is not the end of the session because I believe we have not covered the whole problem of SME. Contract versus tenancy, for example, contract in the land and a contract in products, gender, government failure, and so on and so on. So looking forward to see you again. It is also interesting to have a comparative studies on SME, I guess. I appreciate Dr. Montero and also Elina on this issue. Also Ibu Masrura on giving us an issue and problem on SME in the craft sector. I think this is our proposal. If we could produce like a written publication on this discussion to reach some more ideas, to give them more, perspective, and not only 2 hours discussion, I think that will be fruitful, beneficial to our audience as well. Also, I would like to read a greeting from our Vice Rector, as this event is a joint event from UGM and UNAM. So she highly appreciate to the UNAM for this collaboration and propose to keep the program on. Last but not least, to the webinar team, Lisa, our smart and energetic moderator, we are having a great time. So we're looking forward to next opportunity for having a webinar again. Thank you for the participant, and I see you in the next program. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you, Professor Catur. And the closing remarks have been delivered, indicating that our program is already done. Thank you so very much for your enthusiasm and participation and for your attendance in this Zoom. We remind you to fill the attendance form by click the link which we have already sent to you in chat box. I, Kotamara, hereby and my duty as the Master of Ceremony, on behalf of the organizing committee, would like to apologize if we have made any mistakes throughout the webinar, and we really do hope it will be fruitful for all of you. Once and for all, thank you and see you on the next Web Indo-Africa Center. Stay safe and stay healthy. Good day to all of you.
See you. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's